So governance, the basics for an RDA group. And apologies, because this is quite a dry topic, and Helen has challenged me to make this interesting as possible for you. So I have started off with my current obsession, which is a group I visited last week who are using mini Shetlands in the absence of being able to ride at the moment. So here's what I thought was a rather brilliant innovation with a 10-year-old kid learning to long rein with a mini Shetland. So that has nothing to do with group governance. I just thought it was rather a fun thing to share. So governance. Governance is all about managing and running your group and being able to do so in an effective and safe manner. And I put that cartoon up, which I think is correct for the way lots of people get involved with governance and don't really know what they're letting themselves in for. And it kind of can feel quite scary. And I suppose I liken this sometimes to learning to drive a car, in that if you stop and think about it, it feels a rather crazy thing to do. But in order to manage it, then you make sure you know how to do it, you keep things up to date, and you make sure you're insured and you're managing the risk in the right way. And it's much the same with charity governance and group governance in the UK. And I'm very conscious that nobody gets involved with what we do in order to be able to manage a group. You get involved because of what we do and how we can improve people's lives. So our job, we see here at RDA UK, is to simplify this as much as possible in order to make your job as simple as possible. And so we will do everything we can to simplify and support this for you. Oh, Helen, you just popped up on my screen. Is everything all right? Can we still see what's going on? Oh, there we go. It can feel a bit scary being a trustee and running a group, but actually it shouldn't be, and we'll do everything we can to manage it. The flip side is, of course, that it's the trustees who make the difference. And there's a nice quote there, and actually it's the trustees who drive forward through good governance what we manage to achieve with groups. So just getting into a little bit of the nitty-gritty, RDA itself, the UK organisation, is a federation. So we ourselves are a registered charity, but we're also an organisation made up of a number of smaller organisations with a common goal. That is what a federation is. So every group is its own entity. So you're all separate organisations tied to us by a membership agreement, and you're also registered charities with a standard governing document, which we help you create. If you're already a charity, I think we've got somebody here today who's in a pre-existing charity, then we work within the governing document that you already have. But if you haven't, then we have a standard one which we put together for you. And of course, the group trustees are responsible for the governance of your own group. Currently, we registered new groups, almost all of them, as incorporated bodies. So this means you have a company structure. So in Scotland, that's called a Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisation, and it works through reports to OSCA. In England, it's just a Charitable Incorporated Organisation, sorry, England and Wales, I should say, reporting to the Charity Commission. And in Northern Ireland, we're working, the Northern Ireland, the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland is working to create a CIO there. That's simply a form of charity where you're set up as a company, and that gives you as trustees a slightly greater degree of protection. In terms of governance, though, what do we mean by both governance and good governance? So governance, as it says there, is all the systems and processes, I can't say that word, processes concerned with the direction, the effectiveness, the supervision and the accountability of the organisation. So making sure that you know what you're trying to achieve, you're doing so as effectively as possible, and that somebody is actually overseeing and being accountable for what happens. So as it says there, 6 key things that trustees should be able to do. You should understand your role, and hopefully this little webinar will help you do that. You should be clear about the group's purpose, so what you're actually trying to do as a charity. You need to work together both as individuals and as a team of people, and I'll come back to that a little bit later on. You do need to be able to exercise control and make decisions. So if one trustee decides to spend all the money on a hot tub, then the other trustees would be asked what controls were in place to stop that from happening. And you should be able to demonstrate that there were some controls in place. You have to behave with integrity. So that means you can't buy the hot tub, I'm afraid. And you do have to be open and accountable. So you should be happy to share what you're doing with other people. The trustees, the term trustees is used variously a lot of the time with directors or the committee, and it's important to say that all of those 3 things are the same thing. So trustees is the term generally used within the charity world. Directors is a more businessy term, but it means the same thing in our context. And certainly within RDA, we hear the term committee quite a lot, which is obviously the trustees working together. So who are they? As it says, according to charity law, they are the people who have the control and management of the admin of the charity. So they should be formally and properly appointed, but it's important to note that if anybody is, if anyone actually exercises control over the charity, they're probably seen as being a trustee anyway. So as it says there, in RDA, you have to have at least 3 trustees and no more than 11. 3 is the legal minimum, 11 is our chosen maximum, and we suggest that 5 is actually a good working minimum. If you only have 3 trustees and for some sad reason people fall out and one of them resigns, then you're slightly stuck and you're forced to take on a new trustee really quickly. So 5 gives you a bit of wiggle room and allows a little bit of security there. I've stolen this next slide from the Charity Commission in England, but it does apply in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and really sets out the 6 main duties of trustees. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these in a minute. But trustees are responsible for making sure the charity complies with both their governing document and the law. And that's a key point where we get involved and help. And we have a close relationship with all the charity regulators in all parts of the UK, so that they look at us to help you do that. And we will try and make sure that we're advising you and supporting you to do that. Secondly, you have to make sure your charity is accountable, and I'll come back to what that means. But ultimately, if someone says your charity is doing the wrong thing, it's your job to be able to show that you're not. You have to be able to act, you have to be acting with care and skill. And this really means thinking about what's your expertise and can you use it. So one of the interesting obligations on a trustee is if you're let's say you're a lawyer in your day job, you can't volunteer as a trustee for a group and say, I'm not going to bring any of my lawyerly expertise to this because I'm a volunteer here. You're required to use that. And similarly, if you're a trustee of a charity that needs legal advice and none of you have it, then acting with reasonable care and skill would be saying, actually, here's an issue where we need to go and find professional support. Fourthly, and importantly, it's your job to make sure that the charity is carrying out its purposes for the public benefit. So these are defined in the Constitution, and for RDA, that's providing equestrian activities for the benefit of disabled people and their health and well-being. So it's your job to make sure you're doing that. You have to act in your charity's best interests. So when you're taking decisions, are they the right decisions for the charity? And finally, you have to manage your charity's resources responsibly. So for most RDA groups, that will be the money you have, possibly the horses you own, and sometimes the land or property you own as well. Key functions really here. What is expected of a trustee, and just going a little bit deeper into some of those 6 things. So protecting the assets and ensuring that they're used for the charity's best interests. This doesn't mean that they can everything the charity owns can only ever be used for the by the charity for the charity, but you need to make sure that things that the charity owns are helping you achieve your objects. So if you own a horse, it doesn't mean that that horse must only ever be ridden for RDA purposes, but you need to be able to think, you know, if you have an amazing horse and you're spending lots of money looking after it, and it's only being ridden by one rider once a week, arguably that asset is not really delivering a lot of interest for the group. Whereas if that horse is being used every day by disabled riders, then that's clearly what you're trying to do. You need to be, you're the group of people as trustees who decide what the group should be aiming for and defining longer term plans. So hopefully there will be some kind of plan and some kind of long-term goal, and it's you as trustees to be able, that should be defining that, however simple it is, and helping aim for it. And I've put there just to stress, you're the group of people who have to meet the legal and practical needs of the charity, and that's very much where we as RDA UK get involved to help you try and achieve that. So I have a thing called the single donor rule, and some people call it the Daily Mail rule, and I think a good rule of thumb is to check and think, are you doing or thinking of doing anything that you wouldn't want reported in the Daily Mail or told to a single donor who is supporting you? And if you're not willing to share some of those things, then I think you need to be careful about whether you're actually doing the right thing. So if there are things that you're doing that you're worried about sharing with other people, then just be careful about doing them. And that's exactly the point I'd be calling up us at National Office and deciding whether you should do them or not, because yeah, that's a good working rule. So if we go on to the committee itself, and just to be talk about a little bit about how you make up a good trustee committee. As I said, there must be at least 3, but no more than 11. You do need to have a chair, a treasurer, and a secretary. And as the slide, as the cartoon suggests, I think sometimes we get financial people involved to be our treasurers, and decide to leave everything up to them, and maybe just sort of rely on their expertise. And it's worth really being clear that the trustees of a charity work on joint responsibility, as it says a little bit lower down, and that means that as chair or treasurer, you are no more or less responsible for anything at the group than all of the other trustees. And if you're not the treasurer, you're still responsible for financial decisions. So it's your duty as a trustee to make sure that you're comfortable with the financial position. And if that means relying on your treasurer to help make those decisions, that's fine. But you do have to have some understanding, and you should be able to have some understanding of what's going on. In terms of sort of basic quorums and voting, it's worth noting that in most setups, you need 1/3 of your trustees there to make a quorum. We require you to have a minimum of 4 meetings per year, which should have agendas and minutes, which isn't a huge amount. And recently, of course, most of those have been happening virtually. And if you do have to vote on decisions, then they're made by majority vote in all cases. Appointing trustees is done by your AGM, and those who come to the AGM and vote there are the people who elect your trustees. Every year, a third of your trustees should be resigning, and then they can be reappointed if they wish, but you should have a 3-year cycle effectively. And when you set up your charity, you need to think about how you set up that 3-year cycle, and that's something that we absolutely help you with. But so trustees are effectively signing up for a 3-year term, assuming everything works out okay. As I've said, trustees are jointly responsible for everything, and that means that you can have a good old robust debate in a meeting, but when you come to a decision about something, all of the trustees should be willing and able to defend that decision. And if you feel as a trustee you really can't defend that position, you should probably step down as a trustee at that point, because you're, as a board, you're jointly responsible for all of that. But it is important to make decisions, and I think one of the things that we see sometimes is complicated issues being left on the back burner for too long. So do try and make sure you decide on things and move on. And again, if you can't do that, then please come to us and ask for help. We're more than willing to help you with complicated decisions if you need to, so that we can, you can move things on. But hopefully the kinds of things you need to decide on are relatively straightforward and not too complicated to manage. I'm just going to pause here because I'm conscious that I can't see if there are any questions at all. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second and just check in with everybody, and just if you've got a question, now's a good moment to throw one at me on the chat or the Q&A, but I think we're probably okay. So I will keep going in the absence of any immediate questions, but I'm afraid I can't see the Q&A while I'm sharing screens, but we'll go back to sharing the PowerPoint. Great. So I guess one of the things that we get involved with a lot is all the more complicated, problematic bits of governance, and I just want to go through one or two of those now. And the first one is conflict of interest, which is particularly interesting for an RDA group. So in all parts of the UK, charities have to deliver public benefit, which is quite easy for us to show, but you also have to avoid giving any private benefit. So no private individual or company can benefit by the existence of a charity in the UK. And that seems like an obvious statement, but in RDA's context, that can be quite complicated when, for example, we have groups based in riding schools or livery yards, where people are being paid for looking after horses, for example, or by the group to exist there. And it's not unmanageable, but it does create a conflict, and we just need to be a little bit careful about how you deliver that. Or sorry, how you protect against it and work within it. So the most important thing about conflict is, if you think you have a conflict of interest, it should be publicly stated. And again, we have a method and a way of doing this, which we suggest to all of our groups. And so people with a potential conflict state that conflict on the record, and then if there are discussions or decisions being made by the trustees that relate to that, then that person has to absent themselves from that discussion. Probably the most common one we come across is riding school owners who are also trustees of the group based at their riding school. And in an ideal world, the owner of the riding school wouldn't be a trustee of the group, but completely understand, and it's quite normal for an RDA group to want to work with and sort of be collaborative with that riding school owner. And it may indeed have been that person who's helped set up the group. So in that case, when it gets to the point where you're talking about how much you might pay either to use the facilities or to use the horses or both, then the owner of the school really needs to be, they can make the suggestion, but then they have to leave the room for that to be discussed, and the rest of the trustees can decide whether or not they think that's a fair price and whether or not they want to pay it in the absence of the person who's going to receive the money, because otherwise there's a clear conflict of interest there. Worth remembering, so the most common types of conflict that we have are, say, riding school proprietors, also being people who are being paid as instructors for the group, by the group, particularly those freelance instructors, and people who either own or borrow horses from the group. I think you also need to watch out for trustees who are also trustees of other groups, or maybe involved with companies who are service providers to the group. So someone selling feed or bedding, for example, to your group may be judged to have a conflict of interest. They're not always financial, although all of those I've mentioned seem to be. So we do have things like having more than one family member as trustees of the same group. And it's quite common for us to have a husband and wife, both trustees of a group. That in itself is not a problem, but there's sort of two principles here. One is to say the overall number of trustees, the overall number of trustees who are not members of the family should be in the majority. So let's say you had 3 members of one family who are all trustees on a group. There should be at least 4 other trustees to make sure you balance that out. And secondly, that should be identified as a conflict. And one of the reasons for that is, and I appreciate this is all, I hope, academic, but if an RDA, if one of those trustees causes a problem and you get into a dispute, one of the ways that you might resolve that is decide to remove that person as a trustee, which needs all of the eligible trustees to vote on that. And clearly, if you've got say a husband and wife who are both there, and it's the husband who's caused a problem, I'm conscious it's normally the bloke who causes the issues, then you want to be clear that his wife is going to be in a pretty awkward position anyway, but she clearly has a conflict, and therefore she wouldn't be able to vote on that. And so, I mean, again, as I say, hopefully these are academic, but it's important that those things are out there. The other thing I've put on here is about control with a clear written agreement about landlords or proprietors. And I can't stress this strongly enough. And within the next month, we'll be producing quite a lot of guidance on support on having a lease, or at least a written agreement of some kind with a landlord, if that's the situation of your group. And this is really, really vital. And what that does is, firstly, it formalizes the relationship a little bit. Secondly, no grant funders will now give you money if you haven't got some kind of arrangement in place. And perhaps most importantly, it protects you and your assets. And there's lots of ways of doing this. So an example I particularly like was a group based at a really good riding school, and they received quite a big legacy, and they weren't quite sure how they were going to use it. And the riding school at that time was trying to resurface its indoor school. So what the group agreed to do was pay around £50,000 to buy a new surface for the indoor school. And in doing that, they then came to an agreement with the owner of the school that they could have the use of that surface rent-free for 20 years. So effectively, they're just paying 20 years of rent up front. Everyone was happy, but importantly, that was written down in an agreement. And what that means, and they wrote that agreement about 2 or 3 years ago. What that means is that should the riding school decide that they don't want the RDA group there anymore, the group is protected, and the riding school have to pay the group back for some of that surface on a decreasing basis. So you're clearly fulfilling your duty as trustees to protect the assets. But making sure you have something written down about the arrangement with your landlord is something that's really important, and again, something that will help you with. Next thing that we often come up against is about voting members and who gets to vote at AGMs and general meetings. So it's important to note, as I said, the trustees are appointed by a vote at the general meeting, and the standard constitution allows you to decide who you're going to get to vote at that general meeting. And on the one hand, you could say everybody who is a volunteer and rider at the group is entitled to come and vote at that general meeting, which at face value sounds like a really good idea, but you need to be careful because you do need to get a third of those people to your general meeting for it to have a quorum. So again, we can help you decide what is the right number and the right set of people, the right ratio to get to those meetings in order to make them happen. Interestingly, one of the few legal responsibilities on you as a charity is you do have to keep a register of voting members. So real clarity about who's allowed to vote. And this to me is exactly like that sort of fire escape plan in terms of deciding who, in terms of being clear about who does get to vote at an AGM. So one of the ways that you can resolve a conflict is to bring a conflict to an AGM and get your members to help you decide that. That, of course, is reliant on you knowing who gets to vote there. And I've just been through a process with an RDA group that got to that kind of dispute. They took it to the EGM. There was no clear list of members, and they ended up with effectively both sides in the dispute piling people into that meeting in order to try and get enough people to win the vote, and that's really unhelpful. So and really against the rules. So you do have to have a list of a register of members, and as I say, we will absolutely help you to define that. One of the things that we hear about quite a lot as well is trustees' concern about what liability they're putting themselves out there for as trustees. And this is the scary bit, although, as I said, there is a health warning, and I will qualify this in a second. But it's just worth being clear that trustees will put themselves at personal liability, but only if you are acting unlawfully or outside the terms of the charity, or you commit to debts that are more than your assets. So effectively, if you are acting willfully negligently, then you might be at risk. And when I say willfully negligently, this would be something like if someone had an accident and hurt themselves, and that person could prove that they had wanted to wear a riding hat, but the trustees of the charity had actively stopped them from wearing a hat, then the trustees might be seen to be liable. I've worked at this is one of these scary things I should never say, but I've worked here for 16 years, and not once has a trustee been liable for a problem, because most of the time, if not always, you're acting with good conscience and with the best of intentions. And that's where the but comes from. So you may be liable, but we provide you with insurance. And this should give you real confidence that we've got your backs. So the premise is that everything within RDA is overseen by somebody who's qualified and in charge. That person must be suitably trained, and other volunteers must have had some guidance. And the RDA process, which you'll hear more about, sets that up, delegates that in quite specific ways to group coaches, and means that you as trustees, although strictly speaking you carry the liability, you're absolutely safe from the liability. And I want to really stress that, because it's an issue we hear quite a lot. It's like, help, if I become a trustee, am I going to lose my house if something goes wrong? And as I say, you're only going to lose your house if somebody can actually prove that you actually formally decided to go against the law effectively. So just to cover off, we have 3 types of insurance which cover you. We provide your group with public liability insurance up to £20 million, employers liability up to £10 million, and that's really important for those groups as well that have freelance coaches, and it picks that up as well. So there's a sort of grey area sometimes between formal employment and contracted individuals, and that will pick that up as well. And finally, importantly, that's £5 million of trustees' personal indemnity, and that's a bit that protects you if someone says, well, actually it's the trustees that should have known about this and they didn't. And providing you're acting in good faith, which, as I say, I think everyone generally always is, then that will cover you. So there's quite a lot of cover there, and I'm sorry to sort of end on a maybe a negative note. And I say end because I see my next slide seems to have disappeared, which was a happier, more positive point, saying there's a lot of responsibilities that appear to be on the trustees. But I suppose what I want to be really clear about is that as well as providing you with the insurance to cover you, we're also providing you with the support and the day-to-day guidance, whether that's from your county team, your regional team, or us here at National Office, to make that as easy as possible for you and to pick up as much of that heavy lifting as we can. And we will always support you and your governance to try and make sure that things are as easy as possible. So at that point, you'll note that these are the slides I use when I'm doing a face-to-face presentation, and it's at this point that we get to questions. So I'm going to stop sharing again, and I'm conscious that because we're in a webinar, it's difficult for you to fire questions at me verbally. But if anyone's got any questions they want to put on either the chat or the Q&A, now is your chance. Helen, I don't think we've had any questions through as we go, have we?
I haven't seen any so far, no. So please do pop them in the chat there. If a question comes to you after you've seen this, you can send it in to me later. But it's a great opportunity with Ed here live to ask anything that you are not sure about.
So one of the things that we haven't covered off is actually just the setting up of the charity, and that's a process that we will take you through. So again, in all the jurisdictions in the UK, we have an agreed process with the relevant charity commission. We have agreed standard documentation, and we can take you through that. And our colleague Amanda here has got quite a lot of experience at how we set up charities and what the right answers to the right questions need to be. Currently, the timescale from doing that is anything from a few days up to about 6 months, and it depends very much on the charity commission at the time. I see Caroline's asked, yes, you're a charity, so would we look over your governing document and do an additional piece? That's almost exactly right, Caroline. So we would have a quick look at your governing document. just to check, there's nothing in there that we think would preclude you from being an RDA group, and I never quite know what that would be. And also, we ask you to add a simple clause to your governing document that says that you will uphold and promote the objects of RDA as well as whatever objects your charity has. So hopefully that's a relatively simple process, and then that ties you in with the things that we're trying to do as well. Good, thanks. Good. Any other questions? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to now racking my brains to think what are the common questions that we normally get at this stage of this presentation. But I think yes, my overriding message is that it can be really fun and exciting and fulfilling to be a trustee and to be taking the governance forward, particularly at this stage of your RDA group when you're getting things set up and going. So I'm enormously grateful for anybody who does this, and as I keep stressing, saying, you know, we're here to support you. So I think Helen, that's probably enough from me, isn't it?
That's great. I think it's probably quite a lot for people to take in, but we will be making this available to you afterwards, so you can have the webinar to look through again at your leisure. And if you've got any additional questions, you know, don't hesitate to ask. I think also it's important to stress that there is ongoing help for trustees, so we don't help you set up your group and then just kind of hand it over to you. We have an ongoing programme of training for trustees on all kind of different matters, on fundraising, volunteers, all sorts of things. So and also with the current situation, most of these are online at the moment, so you're not just kind of abandoned as you start.
So see, Caroline, thanks for another question, just saying, is there a membership fee for groups? Yes, there is. So the membership fee is currently, well, it varies according to the size of your group, but it averages around about £180 a year. And in addition to that, we also, the insurance I mentioned, we negotiate on your behalf and sell on to you at quite a reduced rate. If you're an existing charity, as you are, Caroline, then you can choose to come in under our insurance or use your own insurance. That's your choice. We don't want to force you to insure twice, but depending what you feel is best value for you. So, and we think both the membership fee and the insurance cost are pretty competitive, very competitive.
And also the first year, you don't have to pay that membership fee. So.
Oh yes, great, thank you.
And all the coaching courses and things that we put on, the majority of these are all free as well. So we do think the support that's provided. Oh, good value. Yeah, thank you, Caroline.
Brilliant. Good stuff. Well, if that's it, then thank you very much. And as oh, hang on a second, another question coming in from Hannah. Once you've completed the required paperwork, can you start lessons before you have charities officiated? Yes, you can, Hannah. So what, as you picked up the problem here, which is that it can take a while for that to happen. So we set groups up as what we call a transitional group, which we normally would try and make sure doesn't last any more than a year, and that's why it gives you a chance to get everything in order and in place. And yeah, once we've accepted you as a group, as it were, you can get going as long as you've got people who are qualified and signed off to do it. And we will wait for the Charity Commission to catch up if that's what they need to do. Great. So if there's no other questions, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you progress on this journey. and hopefully being able to come and visit you sometime. Okay, thanks very much.